Joining. Thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it on a Monday at 6 p.m. no less. My name is Sasha, and I am part of our LA Forward Institute's Housing Justice team, and we have monthly meetings. And in this month, we are preparing you for the election ahead. We are LA Forward Institute. We are a collection of folks working to empower people to get active in their own communities, specifically around issues of housing justice today. But we range from a number of different different issues that we really fight for and bring people in and empower you through education, thus this event tonight. Next slide. So, like I said, this is to rally everyone to get ready for the November election. And so, as you can see here, we have an election really soon, sooner than many of us are probably even expecting or anticipating, because it is right around the bend. Ballot drops in 2 weeks. We will be focusing on potentially 10 state propositions and 3 county measures on the November ballot. Our voting centers open on the 26th, and the election is coming right up on November 5th, if you can believe it. All right, next slide. So today we are going to be focusing in on 3 major measures and propositions that affect housing justice, that are housing justice related on the November elections. LA County Measure A, California State Prop 5, and California State Prop 33. And not only are we going to be educating you on all 3, but we will be providing actual actions you can take and ways for you to get involved. Some next steps will come from Somos Familia Ballot, as well as some next steps from us around, from LA Forward. And then if we are able to wrap up in time, we hope to be able to have some Q&A so you can ask your pointed questions about any of these measures to our guest panelists today. Next slide. All right. With that being said, I think we can hand it over to Andrea, who will be providing us an overview of today of Measure A, I believe. Yeah, Measure A. So Andrea, I will happily hand it over to you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really happy to present on Measure A. I'm really excited to share about it. So my name is Andrea Vocos. I'm the Housing Coalitions Manager with United Way of Greater Los Angeles. And do I have access to share my screen by any chance?
We can give you access. I can give you
Thank
access.
you.
I can stop sharing my screen and you can share yours.
Awesome. All right, cool. Thank you so much. Okay, let me get my presentation up. Awesome. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, awesome. So yeah, it seems like there's a few people on here that might be a little familiar already with Measure A, but I am happy to be back and share a little more. And I have some more updated information as well. So yeah, Measure A, we had over 400,000 signatures that were collected to get this onto the ballot this November. And I'm really proud of that. We had folks from all different sectors coming together to collect signatures to get this added. And it's just a really wonderful thing. Okay, Measure A. What are the things that helps lead to the formation of Measure A? So we've learned quite a few things in the past few years. So we've learned that since Measure H passed in 2017, we've learned that more than 100,000 people across the county have ended their homelessness permanently. So we've learned that people are ending their homelessness, which is really incredible. But at the same time, we're still not investing enough across the county. It's only less than 4% of the total budget of the across the county that goes towards homelessness prevention. And because of that, there's a lot of impact because of that, and because of constant budget cuts that hit homeless services as well. Some examples that we see are almost 7,000 beds across the county that are offline, and these are long-term board and care beds. And it's simply because there isn't sustainable funding to be able to operate these beds. And in addition to that, we're very aware that we're still quite short of the amount of affordable housing units that we need in the county. We're short almost over 500,000 affordable housing units. And so we really need to think of ways to be able to build faster and at a much lower cost as well. And yeah, we've learned that the fragmented approaches that we've had are just not working. We need to be able to have a county-wide approach to address this county-wide issue that we have. We've learned that we need to think of new ways to finance affordable housing models as well. We've learned that the fewer sources of financing, the faster it is to produce and the lower cost. And we've learned that a single source of financing is the best way to do that. And we've learned that we need dedicated long-term revenue to be able to do this work. We can't rely on a 10-year measure, such as Measure H, to be able to solve all of the things that are facing our way. And we need to be able to have broad and clear goals that are aligned, both system-wise and service provider-wise as well. So with that, Measure A is essentially a repeal and replace of Measure H. It's a citizen-led initiative. It was put together by community experts, folks with lived experience, not by politicians. And it's essentially keeping the things that have been working well with Measure H, but also addressing the gaps and things that have been missing in Measure H additionally. And so the top 3 things to remember about what Measure A does is that it creates more housing we can afford, it creates more mental health care, and creates more accountability as well. And the biggest emphasis that I would stress is that the overall focus with this measure is on homelessness prevention, which is, I would say, the key difference between this and Measure H. So preventing the inflow of people falling into homelessness. So as I mentioned, there have been quite a few good things that have come out of Measure H. So in addition to the over 100,000 people that have ended their homelessness permanently, we also have over 49,000 people across the county that are currently receiving housing or services. But since Measure H is only a 10-year measure and is going to sunset in 2027, if we don't take any action now, all of those people, over 49,000 people across the county, are going to be losing the services or housing that they're currently receiving. And in many cases, it's life-saving. And you can see, I don't know where everyone is located on this call, but you can see, depending on where your geographic region is, you can see the amount of neighbors in your area that will be affected by this. And for many, that will be a death sentence. For many, that's probably going to end up being the cause for people to fall back into homelessness again. And experts say that if we don't take action now and prevent this from happening, we're going to see a 28% increase in homelessness, which is the last thing that we want to see. So as far as what the measure is going to do, it's going to do quite a few great things. So as I mentioned previously, it's going to be expanding mental health treatment. It's going to be increasing the funding for that. It's going to be permanent revenue, permanent funding for that. It's going to be connecting folks that have serious mental illness that are currently living on the streets, connecting them with effective treatment. It's going to help make housing more affordable. So it'll be tripling the current county budget for affordable housing. So in addition to increasing our affordable housing stock in terms of constructing, it's also going to be converting naturally occurring affordable housing into official affordable housing with all of the protections that are contained within that. And it'll also extend covenants on already existing affordable housing as well, which is really incredible. Additionally, it's going to be preventing homelessness. It'll be increasing the investment in emergency rental assistance by 5 times. And we know that for a lot of folks, the difference between staying housed and falling into homelessness could be that extra $100 or $200 that you just don't have to pay for rent that month. So this is going to help prevent a lot of folks across the county from falling into homelessness. It's going to be preserving the services that I mentioned previously that have been serving people by providing housing or services. And in addition to that, it's creating goals and solutions that are going to be legally required, and they're going to be held accountable. So we're creating stronger accountability through a citizen oversight committee as well. And additionally, this is going to be supporting workers as well. So in addition to providing well-paying union jobs to construct the affordable housing units that we need, it's also going to help provide competitive wages for our folks that are doing the really important work on the ground. There are cases of a lot of service providers that are themselves at risk of falling into homelessness. And a lot of that, again, is because of the unsustainable funding and inconsistent funding and payments for homeless service providers. Now, as far as how the measure works, so as I mentioned in one of the previous slides, Measure A has 5 legally required goals that need to be met, which is a really big thing and would be a first for something of this magnitude. Each of these goals will have specific deadlines, specific metrics, specific points that need to be met. And for programs that are seen to not be effective and are not reaching those goals that need to be met, funding is then reallocated to programs that actually are being effective. So there actually would be consequences. So it's good to have that accountability. And again, it'll be overseen by a citizen oversight committee. And you can see here, these are the 5 legally required outcomes. So the first would be increasing the number of people permanently leaving homelessness, which is something that we all want to be able to see. This beautiful thing to be able to see our neighbors get the housing that they deserve. The second goal would be increasing the number of people moving away from encampments into permanent housing. Again, all of our neighbors that live near us all deserve safe, clean, secure, permanent housing. The third one would be increasing the number of affordable housing units in LA County. The fourth one would be to reduce the number of people with mental illness or substance use disorder experiencing homelessness. The trauma of being unhoused is only expounded upon when you also are dealing with a serious mental illness. And we all deserve dignified housing, permanent, secure, safe housing. And the final goal would be to reduce the number of people falling into homelessness. This would be the first time in LA County history that it would be legally required to reduce the number of people falling into homelessness. So it's really important for us to be able to get that into law. So the total funding revenue, the estimate of the annual revenue that would come from this measure is around $1.2 billion. So it's double the amount that Measure H has been raising per year. And you can see here, 60%, the largest chunk is going towards homeless services and mental health services as well. The reason that that's so high, there's a few reasons. So funding for homeless services as it stands is not guaranteed. Funding for these programs are not guaranteed currently. And we constantly see budget cuts as well to these services. And so considering that we have the largest unhoused population in the country, we really need to be able to dedicate the amount of funding and investment that it requires to be able to help serve our unhoused neighbors and siblings. And then in addition to that, within that 60%, there's a 15% guaranteed local solutions fund. And that is meant to encourage all cities in the county to participate. It would include working directly with cities to help them create homelessness prevention programs as well. And then you can see the other percentages. We have 26% going towards affordable housing. So that would be funding La Casa, which I'm sure many folks on here are familiar with, but if not, it's the Los Angeles County Affordable Housing Solutions Agency. And this is what would help us move towards single source financing for building affordable housing. So that would help it be much faster, much less expensive to build, which are both very important things that we need to do since we are short over 500,000 affordable housing units. And then you can see the rest, 11% going towards that increased investment for emergency rental assistance. And then you have 3% here for innovation, data, accountability, to constantly find better ways of utilizing our funds in the smartest way to be able to help the most people possible. And the great thing about this is that it's also flexible, these percentages. So if we see that there might be a little more need and a little less need in some of these, they can expand or decrease as well. So we have that flexibility, which is really great. Now, as far as the funding source goes, so Measure A is a 1/2 cent sales tax. So what that would mean is that it would, for 82 out of 88 cities in the county that are currently paying into Measure H, it would only be a 1/4 cent sales tax increase. It's essentially repealing the previous sales tax and then replacing it with this. So for most cities in the county, it'll only be a 1/4 cent increase from what people are already paying. And then for Compton, Long Beach, Linwood, Pico Rivera, Santa Monica, and Southgate, those cities have not been paying into Measure H. So for those cities, they would see a 1/2 cent increase on sales tax. The great thing to note with this is that a few things, because community experts and folks with lived experience put this together, there were a lot of considerations into the needs of a lot of working class families, folks that are struggling financially. So because of that, the sales tax doesn't apply to over 75% of our regular day-to-day purchases. So it doesn't apply to our things like groceries, gas, rent, WIC purchases, EBT, diapers, menstrual products, medication. And in fact, it's actually going to mostly be applying to tourists, which is great, especially considering that we have both the World Cup and the Olympics coming to LA. And as we know that those events tend to have destructive impacts on the places where they're going, at the very least, we can at least recoup and be able to gain these funds from the folks that'll be visiting. So that is, I think, one very good thing to be able to think about as well. And as far as the impact on folks, because it doesn't apply to most of our spending habits, for low-income households, it looks on average to be an extra $2.50 per month. For more average households, it's around $5 per month extra. So less than a cup of coffee. And then, yeah, if you were to purchase like a tennis racket, a pair of shoes, something for $100, you'd only be paying an extra 25 cents. So in the grand scheme, it's actually quite a small impact individually, but has great benefits that overshadow it. I see that Measure A has really strong intersection between housing justice, racial justice, and environmental justice. Many of us are familiar with the racist practice of redlining in LA County and Southern California in general. And that has caused communities of color, particularly Black communities, living in particular areas, particular undesired areas in the county. And we see that there's overrepresentation of certain communities that are unhoused as well. 8% of the county is Black, but 34% of the unhoused population in the county is Black. The Latina community is a rapidly rising unhoused population. It makes up about 40% of our unhoused population in the county as well. And so we need to be able to correct these overrepresentations. Additionally, we know that urban sprawl is bad for the environment. It reduces air quality, water quality, increases greenhouse gas emissions. Since this is going to be funding La Casa is providing opportunities to finance along transit corridors. And also, additionally, one of La Casa's main tenants is addressing the housing segregation that we have in the county and addressing the lack of affordable housing in high resource communities as well, which I think is really important and something that we really need to work more towards. Some common questions come up with Measure A, including, for example, how is this different from previous homelessness sales taxes? So, for example, Measure H. As I mentioned, there's a few different examples, or there's a few differences. The first main one being the emphasis on homelessness prevention in Measure A that isn't there for Measure H. Another thing, Measure H is only a 10-year measure, so it's going to sunset in 2027. But Measure A will exist in perpetuity. So these will be permanent funds, which is appropriate for the very ambitious needs and goals that we have to meet. Also, Measure H doesn't include funding for mental health services or for substance use disorder services as well. Measure H doesn't include legally required goals or outcomes that need to be met. There isn't a citizen oversight committee overseeing as well. There's quite a few differences. Other questions that come up are, why hasn't more progress been made? So there has been a decent amount of progress. Again, over 100,000 people have ended their homelessness permanently. That's about the same amount that fits in the SoFi Stadium or the Rose Bowl. But if we don't focus on the inflow of people falling into homelessness, then it's just a constant uphill battle. On average, around 100 people end their homelessness per day, but around 125 people fall into homelessness every day. So if we don't address and stop that from happening, then it's just going to be this constant inflow, constant problem that's going to be so difficult to keep up with. Another question, why do we need this if we just passed Measure ULA? So ULA only applies to the city of Los Angeles, but of course we have 88 cities across the county overall. We know that we can't continue to have a fragmented approach to addressing our unhoused crisis in the county. We need a county-wide approach. Also, ULA doesn't have funding for things like mental health care or substance use disorder as well. So we have quite a few supporters that want to see Measure A pass this November. We have over 200 endorsers and supporters, which I'm really proud of. And if you look through this list, I'm sure you'll see quite a few familiar names. And I'm really happy that it's quite a diverse group based on, sector. We have labor, we have faith, we have service providers, we have cities, we have elected officials, and the list keeps growing and growing, which is really amazing. And so if you're wondering what you can do, thankfully you're asking at the right time because we have just launched our voter engagement program. So we are doing weekly phone banks on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 to 7 p.m. And we have one tomorrow. And that's going to be happening from now until right up until election. And we have our whole list of events coming up. If you visit our website, which is yesona.la, and you can click where it says volunteer. Otherwise, you can just directly type in events.yesona.la. And we're also encouraging people to join the LA Fed weekly phone banks, and that'll be in person and online. So they're offering hybrid. And theirs is going to be focused it's going to be like focused on labor. So they're calling their members, calling union labor members. And then we're going to be doing get out the vote efforts. So this is new information. It'll be the final 2 Saturdays before Election Day. And so this is where we're going to do our door knocking. And these are going to be, yeah, knocking on doors, getting folks to vote that we know are supporters or likely supporters, letting them know where their polling location is, things like that. And then, yeah, additional ways to help would be to endorse the measure. That's huge, very helpful. If you feel compelled to give an individual donation, you can do so by visiting yesona.la. Otherwise, you can follow social media. If you follow at The Bold New Way, you can see a lot of, you can, for example, some of the folks in the photo here, you can see different folks and different organizations that are sharing why they support the measure. And then, yeah, most importantly, just let everyone you know that this is going to be on the ballot, because in most cases, for folks that haven't heard about this, once they hear about Measure A, it's a very easy support, very easy yes. It's going to benefit everyone. It's kind of no-brainer, and low impact on individuals as well. So please just let people know. But yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, I guess there'll be time afterwards, after all the presentations, if people have questions. But yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrea. This was great. And we're really excited to also be participating. We'll make sure that everyone that's a part of our housing justice group gets updated information, can find ways to get directly involved, and really fight for the passage of this measure, because it'll do tremendous good for so many people across LA County. All right, Godfrey, are you able to share? There we go. Look at that, right back. All right, so moving on into California Prop 5, a state measure. And the goal of Prop 5 is really to make it easier for local governments, city and county, to be able to afford affordable housing and infrastructure projects. The kind of way it works now is that in order to pass bond measures, and find ways to use debt to fund projects at a city or county level, it requires a 2/3 majority. And this is based off of legislation that's been passed many years ago at the state level. It requires it, and basically what that means is if you get 59% of the vote, you get 61 or 2%. It means that 40 to 38 to 39% minority can block a bond that would fund affordable housing. And so Prop 5 would amend the California Constitution and lower the required threshold down to 55%. And that would specifically be for bonds that are for housing construction, affordable housing construction, and down payment for assistance programs and other public infrastructure projects. Specifically, but the big one obviously for us is this would allow cities and counties to fund through bond projects or bond measures for projects directly supporting affordable housing. And so this was proposed quite a while ago, and it's finally gotten through. It's from Assemblymember Aguilar Curry from Winters, and it passed last year. And so this is a really great opportunity for the state to make it easier for cities and counties across the state to be able to fund projects for affordable housing. And then what's nice little caveat with this is if it is passed, this November, any other bonds across the state would automatically update to that 55%. So any city or county that's also trying to pass bond measures for affordable housing, this would directly impact them this legislative cycle, which is, I think, really exciting. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. We think this is a huge opportunity for the state. And so we are endorsing this, and we highly encourage everyone obviously to fight for this and vote yes. And then also we'll be following up in a little bit about ways you can get directly involved in Prop 5 as well. With that, I'll pass it over to Tressa.
All right, thank you so much, Sasha. I'm going to cover Prop 33, which is also a state proposition. It's a significant ballot measure that aims to expand rent control across the state. So to start, next slide, it's a 23-word proposition. The state may not limit the right of any city, county, or city and county to maintain, enact, or expand residential rent control. Next slide. This proposition is sponsored by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and endorsed by a number of elected and formerly elected California officials. It's a measure that would eliminate statewide restrictions on rent control, specifically the Costa-Hawkins Act of 1995. 1995, folks, it's old. It would allow cities and counties to broaden the types of rent control that they can implement. This includes permitting single-family homes, new buildings, as well as enabling local government to limit rent increases. Next slide. So to understand the significance of Prop 33, we need to look at current limitations. Like I just said, it doesn't apply to single-family homes. It doesn't apply to housing built after 1995. And landlords can raise rent to market rate for new tenants, essentially no vacancy control. Next slide. So Prop 33 would bring about several benefits. It would expand affordable housing options and help prevent displacement and homelessness by giving local communities more control over housing policy. It allows for tailored solutions to local needs. And ultimately, it would stabilize rents for more Californians, providing much needed relief in our high-cost housing market. Prop 33 has garnered support from tenants' rights groups, some labor unions, social justice organizations, because these groups see it as a necessary step to address the housing crisis. Next slide. It's important to acknowledge also the arguments against Prop 33. So critics argue that it may discourage new housing construction, potentially exacerbating our already housing shortage. And there are concerns that reduced property tax revenue would be as a result of Prop 33, as well as increased administrative costs. Also note there were similar measures in 2018 and 2020 that did not go through. So as you can see, there is a significant amount of opposition when it comes to rent control propositions. The real estate industry, local officials, and groups like California NIMBY oppose this measure, and they cite it as concerns about unintended consequences. Next slide. Now, both sides also cite institutional research in favor of their argument. So I have some of the findings from USC, UCLA, and UC Berkeley from some of their studies. And one of them I found very interesting, highlighted there, that putting in place rent control measures offers near-term solutions while we're waiting for affordable housing to be built. If we can keep people in already affordable housing, that helps us with the future plans that we have to build more. With 500,000, as Andrea pointed out, with 500,000 shortage of housing already, rent control offers that stabilization. So next slide. Who supports Prop 33? Here's a list of some of the supporters. Like I said, there's also other tenant right groups and affordable housing advocates that are included in this list. Next slide. It's also important, without talking about 33, I also have to mention 34. This is a controversial proposition that claims it's a retaliatory initiative aimed at the AIDS Healthcare Foundation for support of rent control. Next slide. So bottom line is yes on Prop 33 means that state law would not limit the kind of rent control that could be put in place, whereas a no vote is just keeping where we are now. Next slide. If Prop 33 passes, it doesn't automatically mean that rent control measures will be updated. There won't be new rent control. It will be a measure that allows local government to make changes. Local governments would still need to take action, and that's where you, as a community member, would need to be involved in your local government because the effects could vary based on area and jurisdiction. Next slide. So we'll talk about ways to get involved, but just initially, educate yourself more on this issue when it comes to rent control and Prop 33. Organize in your local community and educate other community members. You can volunteer with Yes on 33 by going to yeson33.org. And remember to vote Yes on 33. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Tressa. That was great. All right. Excited to hand it over to Damiana, who's here from Somos Familia Ballot, who will be talking about opportunities to volunteer for both Measure A, Prop 5 and 33, I believe.
Hi everyone, I'm Damiana. I'm with Somos Familia Valle, the LGBT center that just opened here in the San Fernando Valley. We're located in Sun Valley. We've been in an organization for about 10 years, but we just opened our physical space. So you're all welcome to come through and check it out. I also wanted to invite you all to our volunteer events that happen every Wednesday. Our first one is this Wednesday, actually. Beginning at 3:30 all the way to 8. You can show up anytime in between. I'm gonna put the link to sign up for that in the chat, just so y'all have it for reference. So our volunteer events, like I said, they're in Sun Valley at our LGBT center. We are doing it every Wednesday from here on out, but if you want to come in any other day of the week, you're also welcome to, and we can arrange that because we're gonna have phone bankers and canvassers all throughout the week. So yeah, we'll accommodate you. And yeah, let me know if you have any questions. Yeah, come through. Thank you, thank you. And shout out to everybody for informing us and everyone who's here getting informed. Props to y'all. That's the way to do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And really excited. This is a great opportunity for folks to get directly involved. All right, moving along in our agenda. Godfrey, I believe you're up to provide an overview of some LA City Planning Commission information and action.
Yes. Thanks, Sasha. And thanks to everybody. Everything on this call so far has been things that everybody in LA County, regardless of which 88 cities you live in, impact you, right? Like Measure A and also the 2 straight propositions as well. Certainly, as there are more volunteer opportunities to support any of these housing justice issues across any of those cities, any area of the county, please share with LA Forward and through LA Forward. I know today we've highlighted just some of the possibilities with Somos Familia Valle, which we're really excited to uplift. And of course, they're not the only organization, hopefully, working on these issues as well. So please check things out locally and share them liberally. In LA City, as do many other cities across the county, we have a city planning commission that is charged with making recommendations to our city council around ways to incentivize affordable housing across the city, in particular because of the large gap that we face to be able to ensure that we have enough housing for everybody that needs it. By the end of the decade, as has been mentioned on this call, in LA City, there's about a 500,000 unit gap, which is tremendous. And so city planning is this Thursday, culminating a lot of its community engagement, drafting of policies and ordinances, and thinking at its planning commission, which is very early in the morning at 8:30 a.m., to address all of the things that we know are true already and have been talking about on this call about the state of housing and lack of affordable housing in LA City. And so we want folks on this call, while we're talking about things to do, to remember that we don't need to wait for the ballot for all things. And there are things we can be doing right now. And this is one example of ways we can activate right now to shape solutions for our communities. And so city planning has been drafting ordinances that would both incentivize affordable housing and protect renters in the process who might be impacted by the development of affordable housing in their communities for quite some time, and have done a lot of engagement. LA Forward hosted at least 2 different engagements to get to know these ordinances in draft form, has been part of ACT LA, which has hosted its own series of engagements as well around these efforts. And there have been multiple versions of a draft that are coming to a commission this Thursday, the 26th, some of which uplift some of the need for renter protections that I know we all care about on this call, but really uniquely give the commission an opportunity to consider incentives for affordable housing in single family zone areas, which make up almost 3/4, I believe, of the areas of LA City's planning space. And so what we know is true is that we're not going to be able to reach the number of affordable housing units we need for the city without actually beginning to think about incentivizing affordable housing in those single family zone areas. And so we really need to step toe to toe with any folks who might oppose having affordable housing in their single family zoned areas. Sometimes folks are referred to as NIMBYs. And oftentimes we hear from our council members and from city planning that they hear a lot more from these particular organized groups of citizens to be able to ensure that there's another perspective out there. There are literally, I think, more than 1,000 pages of policy that the commission is actually having to take a look at. And it is up to our comment or anybody's comment who shows up to help direct them to particular parts of the policy that seem to resonate more with community. This is not the only opportunity to advocate here. It is a first, maybe not even first, this is like a second, third, or down the line kind of opportunity, because these recommendations ultimately get brought to the city and city council through city council, first through the planning commission and then to city council. But these aren't just things that are going to like sit sort of by the wayside. There is actually a deadline for the city council to meet, and that deadline is February 12th, 2025. And so by February 12th, 2025, the city will have needed to sign into ordinance something around the incentivizing of affordable housing in the city, as well as what package of renter protections they hope to put in place to be able to support renters impacted by the development of that affordable housing. There is a call to action that ACT LA is part of the coalition that we're in to be able to support the uplifting of these various protections and incentives. You can go to act-la.org/one-click, and they've prepared an email that will go to not just the planning department, but like specific individuals. When you go to that website, you can click on, literally it says like one-click email. If it doesn't work on your computer, try your phone. Basically what it does is it opens a mail client. And if for whatever reason your computer is not synced up to any sort of mail client when you click it, try your phone. If you've got a phone, that also opens mail clients. But those are the particular ways that ACT LA has tried to make it easier for folks to send in comment. You can also show up on Thursday. On Thursday at 8:30 a.m. and come before 8:30 a.m. because what we hear is that hundreds of people may show up, and they will cap the number of people who enter this particular chamber. You can still join by Zoom. There's a Zoom on the agenda. But if you are able to show up in person, that it is helpful to be able to do so. However, we do acknowledge this is a Thursday morning at 8:30 a.m. Very convenient for many folks, as you can imagine, to show up. But you can sign up with ACT LA at that Google form, tinyurl.com/September26-ACT LA. We'll get you there. I know that was fast and furious, and we're going to open up to discussion and Q&A in a moment. But just some other things to uplift before we hit our final 10 minutes on this call. Certainly, as we think about the tremendous number of folks who are facing housing insecurity, it also calls upon the need for various crisis responses that are not armed to be available in our cities, as people are facing all sorts of different circumstances that are potentially having them need a crisis response that may not need to be armed. And so every Monday at 7 p.m., so immediately after this call, we'll be on a different Zoom to continue to catch up on the work that we're doing to advocate for that in the city and the county. And there will be city and county things and state things that we'll be talking about at 7 p.m. on today's call. And then if you go to laforward.org/calendar, you'll see a bunch of other things that we are doing this week and this upcoming month on the road to the election. Again, we're phone banking tomorrow for Measure A. Measures DD and LL are about independent redistricting for LA City and LAUSD, and we're helping to kick off that campaign. On Wednesday, there's a weekly action support group for anybody who just wants accountability and community as they try to volunteer for elections, also meeting that evening. And then in person on Thursday, we'll be in Sherman Oaks asking questions about housing and crisis response to the two candidates that are running to replace Assemblymember Laura Friedman in Assembly District 44. That's Burbank through North Hollywood through Sherman Oaks, a big cross-section, almost 500,000 people in the San Fernando Valley that will receive a new representative starting after November. So again, feel free to look at our calendar, check out those events, sign up for them. And then if you want to support any of this work and want to make sure that there's resource for it, please consider becoming a member of LA4ward.org at literally like $1 a month will help us add up as more and more people continue to support all the work that we are doing. That's it, but I think now I'm going to pass things on for discussion and Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Godfrey. If everyone has any questions covering any of the measures and propositions that we talked about today, feel free to put those in the chat. We have just a little around 9 minutes left, so we'd love to be able to answer any questions that anyone has. I'd say also we're a small group, so if you want to just raise your hand, we can also call in. You can go off mute.
Oh, we'll also stop recording potentially right now in case it is helpful for folks to be able to